This is an extension of my intro video on this machine, so if you haven't seen that already, I'd recommend checking it out. So starting out, I removed this shield under the radiator to drain the cooling system. The drain cock is accessible from the top. Now on to removing the hood. 2 bolts for each hinge and a couple hairpin clips holding the lip support. The fuel filters need to be dismounted, but they do not need to be disconnected. Now for the air intake / dust collector hoses. Three bolts holding the fan guard to the shroud. Disconnect the coolant temperature sensors. Now we're going to get this belt out of here. I have to loosen the alternator since that acts as the tensioner. This bolt right here. The size for the counterweight bolts is a 30 millimeter. Now, so I'm gonna try and remove this corner weight. It's got 2 17s, it looks like. Apparently it's just fiberglass. I'm gonna see if I can just swing this counterweight out of the way to maybe get more access in this direction. Alright, so it didn't move out very far. It's catching on a bolt back there. But that's a lot more access than I had. And you can get a much better look at that balancer in there. Let's see if I can get it to focus. You see that pulley is just freewheeling. As is, I can't get a socket and ratchet on there because of the fan shroud. There's just not enough space. So I'm gonna try to get the fan shroud off because I'm gonna have to go back on with a torque wrench. I'm also gonna go ahead and remove this corner piece as well, just so it's not gonna be in the way. Same as the other side, two 17mm bolts. Next is unbolting the ROPS or the canopy. These are 17, but I don't think they're the originals. Alright, this little side brace here has got to come off too. These bolts are 14mm. Alright, so I got that bracket off that goes right here. And I went ahead and loosened the canopy up, and I fastened a come along to the front blade with chain, and I've got a sling across the top of it to help tilt it forward. And I'm hoping that this is going to be enough space to get this shroud out, or support, I don't know what you'd even call it. But that is the next step. So there's two bolts that come up from the bottom, and they go into the shroud, and they're accessible from inside this little compartment right here. So let's go ahead and get that open. I think they are 14s. My bad, there's 3. For the 3 bolts on this side, you've got to get them from down here, and there's a couple of skid plates that have to be removed. 12mm heads. Alright, so there's 2 bolts about right here and here from the bottom, 14mm heads. The third one actually comes from the top straight down, like right here. It's also a 14. Goodness. All right, one more bolt. I had to crawl underneath to find this, but if you reach your hand under this lip, you can feel it right here. So I'm guessing underneath all this crap, I'll find a head. Yep, there it is. Wow. I felt another stud about midway on this opening, but there's a ground cable connected to it, so I think that's just a stud, not a bolt. At least that's what I'm hoping. But I'm gonna get this bolt out now. It also feels like a 14 millimeter, and we'll try again. All right, showing you guys where the other bolt is. This is the little door behind the seat. You can see the first bolt that I was talking about right there. Got it out. There's another one. Oh, it's not focusing. Right down there. You can kind of just barely see it covered in dirt. But it feels like there's a nut on the bottom side, but I'm really hoping there's not. So let me see if I can get that out. This hose has a bracket attached to this, so I need to also remove that. That's the last one. Let's find out. That was it. Alright, for total reference, there's 2 from the bottom over there, 1 from the top over there. On this side, there's 3 from the bottom. In the middle, there's 2 going down. Roughly like, thirds of this opening right here on each side. Alright, let's get this off. Okay, there's a fuel tank bracket. It's C-shaped over here. You see it up in here? And this panel wraps underneath that. So, or well, it doesn't wrap underneath there, but it is getting caught on it. So just be careful of that. Wedged between the seat and the radiator. It's caught on a little lip of the radiator back here. The radiator support. And I can't push it back because it's hung on the seat. Or it's up against the seat. Alright, so where this is getting stuck is, see this black? You can't see that. This black member right here is part of the radiator support, and this lip is that shroud, and it needs to slide back just enough to clear it to slide up. Problem is the seat, and you can see right here, is fixed. And, you know, I can't move that, and I don't feel like unbolting the whole seat just for this. So that's keeping it from moving backwards. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take an angle grinder and I'm gonna cut a little cut right through here and just bend this little tab down. It's only about 1.5 inches long up in there, so I should be able to bend that down and this should slide straight out. All right, so I've also had to remove the hose, but as you can see back in there, I got that cut made and the little tab bent down, and already this thing has risen up about 1 inch. So I think we're clear here. So let's give it a shot. Wow, easy peasy. Got that fighting me. Crazy. And I could have taken this hose loose, but one, I don't have a wrench that fits it, and two, that would have made a huge mess. So I saved myself the trouble of that. It wasn't that hard to cut. It only took me about 5 minutes. You can see this little tab. So you can see that little tab that I was talking about. The radiator support sits right in this area, and it was hitting on this lip. So I'm just going to cut this off when I go back together and clean the edges. But the reason I had to do this whole thing, alright, so to reiterate why I even had to do this whole process is, see, there's not enough space to get a socket and ratchet on the crank bolt down there because of the fan shroud. To get the fan shroud off, there's 6 bolts, 3 on each side. This side's no problem. I was able to get these 2 lower ones. I can probably show you now. You can see one down there and one right there. But this one right here, you cannot get with that shroud in place. And I'll show you why. Because, you know, the radiator, it sets up in this area and comes down. And that bolt is right here. And since it sits in a corner like this, and say like my knuckle is that bolt, it's about right there. So it's literally impossible to get a socket on there. I guess retrospectively looking back, I could have drilled a hole in here and accessed it from here or from this backside, but you shouldn't even have to do that. And even still, it doesn't guarantee that you can even get the fan shroud out of the way. So I just went ahead and did all this because, I mean, I guess it wasn't that much work. But let's go ahead and finish getting that shroud off. Now we're going to remove this top piece. should have just removed this bracket with it, but that's okay. Work. It's finally loose. I'm going to unbolt the fan blade and get that out of the way too, because the more space, the easier it is. Okay. So I realized that the radiator is basically ready to come out, and that's because 4 of the 6 fan shroud bolts, the outermost, they actually hold the radiator in place. So not the outermost. The 4 lower bolts actually hold the radiator in place. You see there. So I'm just going to go ahead real quick and get this out of the way. Then we will get that fan blade off. Alright. Reservoir hose. And yeah, it needs a good cleaning, but now's a good time to do it. These are 12 millimeters. They're kind of long. Alright, so now you can get an even better look at the crank pulley. That is the issue I'm having. It's like the rubber came loose from both sides. Anyways, I can actually get an impact on that, and this will go real quick. Absurdity. Alright, and this is the Isuzu part number for the pulley. I actually ordered this one off of Alibaba. It was shipped straight from China. It took about 4 business days to get. It was $75 with $60 of shipping. I could have got it local, but it was a maybe from someplace in Florida, and it was about $255. There were some other domestic vendors that either were unsure that they could get it, or it was like well over $500. But parts like this are still pretty readily available overseas. So that's how I ended up getting it. And it was super easy dealing with the customer service that they have there. This comparison of the two pulleys. The new one is definitely a little bit larger, but I think it's just the depth of the V, because on the inner diameter of both pulleys, they do look pretty much the same. And then the width, you can also see how it tapers out more on the new pulley, which would be indicative of it being deeper. There was no Loctite on this before, so I'm not putting it back. So obviously I don't have a service manual to be working on this, but I looked up the specs for this bolt. It's an M14 thread. The pitch is 1.5. I'm pretty sure the grade is the 14.9, given by how hard it was to remove with the impact. So I'm gonna go 200 foot-pounds, and I think that should be pretty good. The tool I'm using to hold it, for anyone curious, that's a hydraulic gland nut wrench. It actually fits inside the bolt holes of the pulley really well. And since you don't need a puller to remove it, it's not a big deal if the threads get damaged. Plus, there's still a pair left anyways. Okay, there's 200. Alright, so now that the pulley is torqued and back on, time to reassemble. Reassembly is the same as disassembly, just in reverse, and I will pick back up once it's all back together and we'll try it out. I think it's together enough now that I want to go ahead and start it, just to make sure there's nothing crazy going on with that pulley or the belt drive system, because nothing was running at full speed before, so I don't know if everything's good or not. And since it's still somewhat apart, I definitely want to make sure it's good first. So let's clean everything off and start it.